Most retirees worry about running out of money. But here's what's worse: having $3 million in the bank and living like you're broke because you don't know how much you can safely spend. You need to become a strategic spender. And that's where most people, they freeze, because the question isn't, do I have enough money? The real question is, how do I turn this nest egg into dependable monthly income in retirement, all without overspending or making a costly retirement withdrawal mistake? I see this constantly. Clients come in with $3 million in retirement assets. They feel they should be wealthy, but instead they're terrified because they don't know how to build their retirement paycheck. They're pretty sure they can, but they don't know for sure if they can afford that trip to Europe. They don't know if spending $10,000 a month is safe or reckless. So they end up living far below their means, sacrificing expenses they could easily afford, and it's all because they lack a clear withdrawal system. But here's the good news. The retirees who figured this out, they sleep soundly at night, they travel when they want, they're generous with family, they actually enjoy their money. And it's because they have a clear, systematic approach to building their retirement income. Today, I'm showing you that exact system. You cannot build a retirement paycheck until you know your exact numbers. Not close, not estimates, talking about exact. Here's where most people start. They say, I think we spend about $6,000 a month, but when we actually pull their bank statements and credit card bills, it's $8,500. That's a $2,500 per month gap over the course of a year. That's $30,000 they did not account for. And over a 30-year retirement, that's potentially a $1 million mistake. So here's what you need to do first. Pull up your last 3 months of bank statements and credit card bills. Add up everything: mortgage or rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, gas, entertainment, subscriptions. I'm talking about everything. Then divide that total number by 3. That's your real monthly burn rate. But here's the critical part most people miss. You need to include taxes in this calculation. When you were working, taxes felt like an afterthought because they were automatically withheld from your paycheck. But those withholdings, they shut down in retirement. Now, taxes become a much more manual expense that you have to plan for. Let me tell you about Jennifer. She retired at age 62 with about $2.5 million saved. She calculated her expenses at $7,000 per month, and that felt pretty comfortable. But she forgot to account for taxes on her IRA withdrawals. When we pulled out $84,000 per year to cover those expenses, she owed about $16,000 in federal and state taxes. Suddenly, her $7,000 per month budget needed to become $8,300 per month to cover both the living expenses and taxes. That's an 18% increase that she hadn't initially planned for. So here's the formula. Calculate your total annual expenses, including an estimate for taxes. Then subtract your total annual income from income sources like Social Security, pensions, or rental income. Whatever's left over, that's your annual deficit. That's the gap your portfolio needs to fill. Divide that number by 12, and that's your starting point for a monthly retirement paycheck. Now, I know what some of you are thinking: how can I estimate my taxes if I don't know where my income is coming from yet? And that's a great question. That's exactly why this process requires a second pass. Once you figure out your withdrawal sources in step 2, you'll come back and recalculate your tax bill. But you do need to have that baseline first. Once you know how much you need, the next question is, where does it come from? And this is where most people make expensive mistakes, because not all dollars are created equal. Here's what I mean by that. You might have money in 3 different buckets. First, you've got your tax-deferred accounts, like traditional IRAs and 401ks. Every dollar you pull from these is taxed as ordinary income. Second, you've got your taxable brokerage accounts. Withdrawals on gains here will trigger capital gains taxes, which are often lower than ordinary income tax rates, but you still need to manage them carefully. Third, you might have Roth accounts, and withdrawals from Roths are tax-free, which make them incredibly valuable for managing your overall tax burden. The big mistake, though, that's pulling from these accounts randomly without a strategy. I see retirees withdraw everything from their IRA because it's easy, but they end up in a higher tax bracket than necessary. Or they ignore their Roth completely, missing opportunities to reduce lifetime taxes. Here's the smarter approach. You want to create a retirement withdrawal strategy that keeps you within favorable tax brackets. For many retirees, that means staying in the 22% or 24% federal bracket if possible. I mention those brackets because that next jump, which takes you to 32%, is a big one. And for capital gains, you'll also want to stay below certain thresholds, like the ones that trigger the net investment income tax. That's an extra 3.8% on top of your capital gains rate. Now, let me tell you about Tom. Tom had $2 million in his IRA and about $500,000 in a taxable brokerage account. His first instinct was to pull everything from the IRA and leave the brokerage account alone. Now that sounds simple, right? But when we ran the numbers, that strategy was going to push him into the 32% tax bracket every single year. Instead, we built a blended approach. We withdrew enough from the IRA to fill up the 22% bracket, then we filled the rest of his income needed from the brokerage account, harvesting long-term capital gains at the 15% federal rate. This strategy saved him about $8,000 per year in taxes. Over 30 years, that's $240,000 staying in his pocket instead of going to the IRS. But here's the part that surprises people. Your withdrawal sources might change year to year. In years where you're doing Roth conversions, you might pull more from your taxable account to avoid stacking too much ordinary income. In years after you start Social Security, you might adjust again because now you have guaranteed income filling part of your tax bracket. This is by no means a set it and forget it strategy. It's dynamic. And here's the critical reminder. Once you figure out your withdrawal sources, you need to go back to step one and recalculate your taxes because the source of your retirement income directly impacts your tax bill. If you're pulling mostly from IRAs, your taxes will be higher than if you're blending sources. This is the iterative part of building your retirement paycheck. Now, here's the part most people completely overlook. Your retirement withdrawal strategy doesn't just depend on where you pull money from. It depends on having the right foundation in place before you start withdrawing anything. And that foundation is cash and a proper portfolio allocation. So let's start with cash. A good rule of thumb for most people is keeping at least 12 months of living expenses in cash reserves. Not invested, not in bonds even, actual cash sitting in a high-yield savings account or money market fund. Why? Because market downturns are inevitable. And the worst thing you can do is sell stocks after they've just dropped 30% just to fund your living expenses. That's how you lock in losses and permanently damage your portfolio. But if you have 12 months of cash, when the market drops, you don't panic. You use your cash cushion to fund your retirement paycheck while your portfolio has a chance to recover. You are avoiding selling low, and you give yourself time to let your investments bounce back. I had a client who retired in early 2020. Perfect timing, right? 2 months later, of course, the market crashed during the pandemic. But because we'd built an 18-month cash cushion before he retired, he didn't have to touch his portfolio. He wasn't even really paying attention to it. We funded his income entirely from cash and bonds while the market had a chance to recover. By the time we needed to tap investments again, his portfolio, it was back to all-time highs. If he didn't have that cash buffer, he would have been forced to sell at the bottom. That could have cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of his retirement. Your portfolio in retirement should look different than it did during your working years. You still need growth from stocks to keep pace with inflation over 30 plus years. But you also need stability from bonds and cash to weather that short-term volatility. Research from the Journal of Financial Planning suggests that portfolios with 50 to 75% stocks tend to support higher sustainable withdrawal rates in retirement. And that's all while maintaining purchasing power. But if you're uncomfortable with that level of stock exposure or simply don't need to take that much risk, less in stocks can still work. You'll just need to know how it affects your withdrawal rate. The key here is proper diversification, and that means not just US large cap stocks. You want exposure to small cap, international, value, growth, maybe even some real estate investment trusts. Diversification, it smooths out returns over time, which makes your retirement income more predictable. This next part is a bonus, and this is where the guardrails strategy comes in. And it's one of the most powerful frameworks in retirement planning. Here's the concept. Your initial retirement withdrawal rate, that's your baseline. So let's say you retire with $2 million and you need $100,000 per year. That's a 5% initial withdrawal rate. But as markets fluctuate, your actual withdrawal rate will drift. If the market has a great year and your portfolio grows to $2.3 million, your $100,000 withdrawal now only represents 4.3%. If the market has a terrible year and your portfolio drops to 1.7 million, that same $100,000, it now represents 5.9%. So guardrails create dynamic boundaries. The capital preservation guardrail triggers when your withdrawal rate rises more than 20% above your initial rate. The prosperity guardrail triggers when your withdrawal rate falls more than 20% below your initial rate. So what does that mean? Let's use our example. Your initial rate is 5%. Your capital preservation guardrail would trigger at 6% because that's 20% above 5%. Your prosperity guardrail would trigger at 4% because that's 20% below 5%. If your withdrawal rate hits 6% or higher, you can take a 10% pay cut for that year. So instead of withdrawing $100,000, you withdraw $90,000. That gives your portfolio breathing room to recover. It prevents you from depleting your assets during prolonged downturns. Now, on the flip side, if your withdrawal rate drops to 4% or lower, you get a 10% raise, and now instead of $100,000, you withdraw $110,000. This allows you to enjoy the good when markets are doing well. The guardrail strategy, of course, it's complex and it deserves more time. So let me know in the comments if this is something you want covered in depth in a future video. In the meantime, a key takeaway from that guardrail section is that it lets you get a pulse check on your plan. How healthy is it? If your health is in good scores, you have that much more confidence to spend and live your life. The reality of retirement income, it changes. And here's something that almost nobody tells you. Your retirement paycheck will change. And that's not just okay, it's expected. In my entire career, I've only had one client who stuck to the exact same monthly withdrawal for a full decade. Just one. And that's out of hundreds. Everyone else, their retirement income evolved as their life evolved. So here's what I see most often. The first few years of retirement, you're healthy, energetic, and excited to travel. So expenses are a bit higher. You might take that dream trip to Italy, renovate the house, buy a new car. Your retirement paycheck, it's at its peak. Then Social Security starts. Suddenly you have guaranteed income stream covering a big chunk of your expenses. Your portfolio withdrawals, they can decrease. Also, your tax situation shifts. Now your retirement paycheck structure completely changes. And then eventually travel slows down. You're not eating out as much. You're more focused on comfort and health. Basic living expenses often decrease, though healthcare costs can rise. Your retirement paycheck might shrink in real terms, and that's totally okay. The point is this: flexibility is essential. The best retirees don't lock themselves into a rigid plan and never adjust. They monitor their situation annually. Then they make changes when life changes by staying proactive. Let's go ahead and put all this together. Building a sustainable retirement paycheck comes down to 5 steps. Step 1, know your exact numbers. Calculate your real monthly expenses, including taxes. Subtract your guaranteed income sources. That gap is what your portfolio needs to fill. Step 2, determine your withdrawal sources strategically. Blend IRA withdrawals, taxable account withdrawals, maybe even some Roth withdrawals to minimize lifetime taxes and stay within favorable tax brackets. Remember, this isn't static, it changes as your situation evolves. Step 3, build your foundation. Maintain at least 12 months of cash reserves. Set a proper portfolio allocation that balances growth and stability while diversifying broadly across different asset classes. Step 4, test your plan. Use a framework like Guyton's guardrails to know when your plan is healthy and when adjustments are needed. Be willing to cut spending when necessary and take raises when markets reward you. Step 5 is to stay flexible. Review your plan annually. Make changes when income sources change, when expenses shift, or when life throws you those curveballs, because retirement is fluid and it's not a straight line. When you follow these 5 steps, something changes. You stop worrying about running out of money. You stop second guessing every purchase. You start living with confidence. And that's what retirement should feel like. Not stress or fear, but confidence, freedom, and the ability to enjoy what you've spent 40 years building. Now, your retirement withdrawal strategy is heavily influenced by your tax bill. So you'll need to watch this next video to connect these big pieces of your plan. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.